over 10,000 TCs built. This one is number 6757, built in October of 1948. Done in Clipper Blue with biscuit interior. Pretty popular color scheme of the day. And like the pre-war cars, TCs had the 19-inch wire wheels, had the nice big 8-inch M140 headlamps. The later ones had the more bulbous cat-eye type lenses like this. They still had the familiar square-rigged radiator shell and the vertical slats. This one has Brooklyn screens, and it gets driven a lot in the summer with the screen down and just the Brooklyn screens up like this. It was the first production car that MG built after the war, and a lot of the American servicemen brought it home after the war. It was kind of the sports car that started it all in the United States. They started racing these cars in the late 40s and early 50s, and the sports car clubs took off. MG clubs over here took off, and then TDs came along in late 1949, and they had independent front suspension and left-hand steering, and those became even more popular here in the country. But the TC is really the one that started it here for sports cars in general. So basically, it was just about like the pre-war cars, other than a little bit wider and a little bit more reliable suspension. They sat down and went over the service records of the cars that were built before the war and looked at the complaints in the problem areas and decided that the sliding trunnions would have to go, because that was a problem. The sliding trunnions were at the rear springs, at the rear of the front springs and the rear of the rear springs, and the spring actually slid through bronze bushings at the back, and if they weren't well maintained, they wore quickly, and then it became not such a hot idea. So they replaced those with the shackles on the TC, and the body tub was actually made 4 inches wider than on the pre-war TB also. But the engine that the TB used, the XPAG engine, was a good engine, and it was retained and used throughout the TC and TD and TF. Being a later TC, the firewall is body color rather than green. It's got the shallow flutes rather than the deep half-round flutes. The ammo boxes open up. Got the toolbox back here, and the jack and jack handle and other various tools were kept in here. It's white felt lined, and battery box is right there. Standard regulator, RF95. Engine size is 1250 cc's, the XPAG engine. Twin 1.25" SU carbs. It's a standard pushrod engine, nothing exotic about it other than it's very tunable and high revving. I rev this one to probably 4,500 or so, and that's about my limit for it, but it would go higher. You can see the exhaust manifold that's kind of whitish, that's been aluminized. The big old Lucas starter is down below the steering column, and you can see the steering box down in there maybe. That's got a Tompkins kit on it. And you can see from the general appearance of the engine that it's really a driven car. It's not a show car. But we have a lot of fun with it.
Okay, we're rolling.
Being a later TC, this has the Export Gold Pearl 3-spoke steering wheel, and also has the metallic gold instrument panel with black lettering. However, I think it probably should still be black instrument panel, and it should also be biscuit Rexine covered dashboard rather than wood. This is like the earlier TCs, which is a little more pleasing, I think, and fairly common to have wood regardless of the age of the TC. It's got the telescopic Desmo interior mirror here. Starting down here, we have the speedometer in front of the passenger and amp gauge. And then we have a dual gauge on this TC to give us water temperature and also oil pressure. and we have the rev counter in front of the driver. Also, we have the horn button dip switch right here, which is very handy. While you're driving, your left hand is here and you can pop the horn, you can dip your headlamps. And the ignition switch is here and headlamp switch there. Got a starter pole down on this end with the choke here. Have a fog lamp switch and dash inspection sockets, ignition warning light, and the dash panel for the lights. This switch is here, and this is a slow running control, which will change your idle speed.
Dead with you, those jewels on.
No, I like them. I think they're great. My sister-in-law will love them too.
Oh, well, what can I say? But
Yeah.
it might be a little advanced, but come fall, that's what
yeah.
you're going to see.
Well, it's almost unbelievable, but I really wasn't counting on bringing the car up here with me. It had been sitting in my garage for 20 years on blocks, and I had kept the engine oiled, and I'd, of course, drained the fuel tank and fogged it so that it didn't rust, and I had really taken pretty good care of it, and I even kept the tires aired up, and I kept the leather oiled up, and I kept a big MG mitten over it, and even the tires weren't deteriorating because they were covered up. Ozone and ultraviolet hadn't gotten to them. So the car was in a nice original condition, but the paint was starting to flake on it, and of course I had to paint it the color it is now after Watkins Glen 48. It originally was all black, but this is a 1948 Hudson color, this platinum that's on here now, and that's because a Hudson body shop actually did the repair work for me after 48. And I like that color, and I'm glad I picked it. I've never seen another car painted that color. My old Indy car was painted platinum after the 1950 wreck, and so those are the only two cars I had that were painted that way. But when we found this car, when they came and got it, actually Dan Smith and Ron Dilger, who have a company called Nationwide Auto Restorations, they came over one day to my house and with a big trailer and put the car on it and said, we're going to fix it up and we want you to help, and we'll just all work on it and get it ready to take to Watkins Glen. And that's real friends that do things like that for you.